welcome to another video. In my last video I talked about resetting your focus in game, and this one is going to be a staying in the zone or staying in focus when you've already reset once or twice or how many times it might be. I'm mostly going to talk about something called being in the zone. Being in the zone is the same as something called flow or experiencing flow, and flow is a concept from positive psychology, which is the scientific study of what makes life worth living, essentially. Flow is when you feel like you're completely immersed in something and your focus is on the most optimal level. You feel like you're a charged battery, basically, and you can go all out on anything that might come in your way in whatever activity you're doing. And you basically lose track of time. You lose a sense of the need to sleep, fatigue, eat, whatever, while you're in that state, because in that state it's hard to describe it in very clear terms, because you lose a sense of time and space, and that can mean anything to the person that hears that combination of words. So for example, in Overwatch, it's when you play Hanzo, for example, and you predict every shot. When you play Widow and you grapple up, let's say on Ilios, you grapple up, you do double headshots on a Tracer and then on Ana, and you kill those two, and then you continue killing the rest of the enemy team. It's what players refer to as popping off. It can be, for example, if you're playing Roadhog and you're hitting every hook and the enemy team can't do anything about you and you never die, you are basically immortal. For example, we see it in the pro scene when players like Seagull, Carpe, Taimo, EQO, Effect, Fleta, and so on basically do crazy plays. They keep doing them and it feels like they can't be stopped, essentially. In order to get to the in the zone, like I described in my last video, it's like how you reset your focus. You need to have clear goals. You need to know how to achieve them. You need to know how to start moving to them. You need to have something blocking them, like something difficult, a difficult challenge or something you perceive as a difficult challenge. And you must perceive your own skills as very high, like so high that you can overcome the challenge. And it can be, for example, that's the reason I chose duels as a DPS, for example, because it's very easy to see someone else's skill and compare it with your own skill. For example, if you're playing Widow versus Widow and the other Widow is constantly headshotting you while you're missing the shots, that's a difficult challenge to overcome, because you know how well you self can aim sometimes. And if you know that you can't aim better, then you basically can't enter this flow state. It might sound weird, but that's a condition. You need to know that your skill is high as well. And that's why I mentioned to think about the last time or a moment in time where you were super good at a hero, whatever. You need to also not have any distractions. You can't have your focus spread out. You need to be fully focused on the task at hand, because the human brain can't process as an infinite amount of information. There's, I think, the same guy who coined the term flow. He also talked about in a TED talk how the human brain can only go through 110 bits of information per second or something, and decoding language, for example, or speech requires 60 bits of information per second. And if you then think about strategy, calling ults, thinking about enemy ults, all that stuff, you quickly realize that you don't have much attention at all to only the task at hand, and you might be distracted by different stuff. That's why we see different players take on majority, they take on a role. For example, like you have a Lucio keeping track of ults and stuff. You have someone calling targets, you have someone calling plays, etc. And it's very easy to find these conditions in Overwatch, especially in matches, because at least for DPSs and even for tanks, even for flex tanks, supports, but it's not as intuitive as it is on DPS for newer players and so on. It's because you need to think about the steps to a goal, and you need to think about the tasks that you need to complete in order to reach that goal and overcome a challenge. For an example, if you're playing a D.Va in a dive versus dive match, and you want to be in the flow, you want to be in the zone, and you know that your tasks are to protect the backline, but you don't really know much more. Let's say the enemy are playing a tracer that flanks constantly. One of the tasks you'll have is stopping the tracer, and you need to know how to stop her and where to start. So for example, you need to know where she's gonna flank, you need to know how to stop the flank, you need to know when to stop it and all that stuff. And the experience of a player might dictate how well you understand that, because not everyone knows, for example, how dive is supposed to be played, or they don't have enough experience playing it, so they can't remember it, or it's not stored in muscle memory and so on. So you can't really enter this flow state just on command right off the bat. You need to have the skills for it as well, so to say. You need so there's moving on, there's like 3 major conditions to enter a flow state, from the same dude who coined the term. And one of them is you need to have immediate feedback. The second one is you need to know the tasks. And the third one is you need to have a perception of the challenge, the balance of the challenge and your own skill, basically. So if we start with the immediate feedback, as a DPS, it's pretty easy. You know that if you do more damage than the enemy DPS, if you kill more than you die, you basically do a good job. To simplify it, I mean. But if we think about main tanks, flex support, main support and so on, you don't really always know if you're doing well. For example, if you would play Pharah Mercy with Winston, D.Va and Lucio in the old days of Pharah Mercy, the Lucio would have a very vague role, but it was an essential role because his job was to stay alive, to speed, to distract, basically. But it's so different from how you normally would play Lucio, because normally you would peel, you would try and do something, and not only try and survive and distract. You basically take on the role of a tracer as Lucio in that situation. And it would be hard for players who play that composition and is on the Lucio role to feel that they are doing something good or if they are doing something wrong, because they don't really know, besides if they die or stay alive, and if the team wins the fight or the team loses the fight, in terms of getting immediate feedback. And if you realize that, you can quickly understand what type of goals there are, and you can construct your own tasks, and you can be more aware of what's happening. It doesn't have to be done in game. You can do this out of game and sort of shape your own idea of what's supposed to happen. And if you're, for an example, playing D.Va, as I said, and you wanna protect your backline, it can be versus Genji or Tracer, as I mentioned. And to know if you're doing well, you can, for example, check if your backline is taking damage, if they're dying. Is your backline distracted by the enemy flankers? Are you able to kill the enemy flankers? Do you hit your shots? Do you miss your shots? Do you die or do they die, and so on? That's different ways of looking at how you can find immediate feedback. And the key then to the third condition, which is the perception of the balance, is you need to know how good the Tracer or Genji is in that case, or it doesn't really matter about those heroes, but it matters about the challenges in front of you. You need to know how difficult something is, because if you know that something is difficult, really high up, and that your skill is also super high up, when you overcome that challenge, that's when you have the ability to enter the flow state. But if your challenge is super high up and your skill is super low, like let's see here, there. Okay, there we go. Yeah, then you face more anxiety, you face more stress and so on, because you can't overcome the challenge. It feels impossible. And when it feels impossible, it feels like you want to give up and so on. And that sets you into anxiety. You want to stress, you want to worry. You don't know if you're going to succeed. You're not sure if you'll win the match and so on. And you feel guilt because you think you can do better, or maybe you want to do better and you don't want to let your team down and so on. Yeah, as I mentioned, it's much easier for DPS to enter this state, because one of the I guess it's a condition as well. You need to be active in the activity. It can't basically be scoping as Widow and watching someone else fight and then enter flow. You don't really enter flow without doing something yourself. You need to be engaged, fully immersed in something. And that's why you can see different players in ranked pick DPS, for example. A majority of players picking DPS, because it's a hero that's very easy to see the rewards with. You can see exactly the tasks at hand, and you know exactly when you're not doing well or when you are doing well. And it's more rewarding, or not rewarding, it's easier to be rewarded because you know how to get the reward. Versus if you play support or main tank and you don't really have an idea how to play it, you don't really know what goals you want to set, you don't know what tasks you need to what steps you need to take to reach those goals. And because you don't know that, naturally you won't be able to feel rewarded for your contribution to a team, or you might not understand how to reach a reward, and you might feel like the role isn't for you because you never get rewarded for something. So yeah, to sum it all up, to stay in the zone, you need to have a goal. Something must be difficult, and it has to be in the way of the goal. You need to overcome it as well, and you have to stay focused on the process rather than the result. And that means knowing the steps, taking the steps and overcoming the difficulties. Whenever you notice that you're focusing more on the result, when you're letting something distract you, so it can be feelings, it can be outside distractions, it can be in-game distractions, it can be splitting your attention, maybe some teammate asks you for more help and so on. You need to know when to disregard the distraction, basically. But I want it to be understood that you can't really be egoistic as well. As a star player on DPS, you have to be egoistic. But for example, if you're playing tank, you can't really say, "Nah, man, I can't help you. I need to do damage here, so I'm getting into the zone." It's not really that simple, if you understand. There's many ways to keeping distractions away, and one of the best ways I've learned is the breathing exercise I described in my last vid. That's it.